Oh, great, the camera's recording. Oh dear. Oh, quick, say something. Now, I really like Live and Let Die. It's a great book. Here's mine, my copy of it. It's a fantastic book. I think Mr. Big's a great villain. Let's just get that out of the way. Mr. Big is a fantastically written villain. There's an element of mystery around Mr. Big. He isn't actually in it a ton, really. He's absent from a large chunk of the book, but his presence is constantly felt throughout the story. His associates are there, troubling Bond, making Bond's life hard. And Mr. Big is a really interesting character. His dialogue, I just can't stress how well written his dialogue is. Every character is just well written and all that jazz, but Mr. Big just goes to this extra level. It's like here's Bond and Leiter and all the others right here. Mr. Big's here. His dialogue, fine. His character might not be ideal, although I think his character actually is pretty villainous and slimy and what you should expect. But his dialogue is so good, and you don't really get that in the movie as much. I mean, I think I prefer the novel incarnation of Mr. Big than the film incarnation. Live and Let Die is just a really compelling story, to be honest. It really works tremendously well. And I think the thing about Live and Let Die is it was never going to top Casino Royale immediately. It was always going to be a bit of a difficult second album in a way. And I think the way the story is constructed is quite gradual and quite an interestingly paced story. It's paced very well, but we're not barreled into action. So that's an interesting element. It's paced differently, I think, to Casino Royale. It's a bit longer, so it's a bit, it's not much longer. It's about five. I don't know. It's not much longer. It's a smidge longer. Felix Leiter is more fleshed out and more interesting in this novel than he is in Casino Royale. Here we get much more of him. He reminded me of David Hedison in Live and Let Die, and indeed in License to Kill. In fact, in terms of story beats, this really reminded me of License to Kill and of Live and Let Die, and those, mainly License to Kill. I was reading whole chapters thinking this was adapted years later in License to Kill, which makes me appreciate License to Kill more, because people say it's a bit like a Miami Vice kind of movie. It's not a proper Bond movie when literally ripped stuff direct from the pages and put it into the movie. So I love License to Kill even more for that. This book is great. The ending's a little bit rushed, I feel. It's not quite as, I don't know, it's a very well written finale and I like it a lot, but it could have been a bit more impactful and a bit more brutal, I don't know, or a bit more drawn out. Maybe if I were to read this again or read that chapter again, I would have a different opinion, but at the moment it's a bit more of a, it's a bit rushed. I like the themes of the story. It's not quite as politicized about, East-West Cold War stuff as in Casino Royale. There's a lot of race stuff in here, which is very much of its time. This book's arguably more rooted in the time it was made than Casino Royale, which you could modernize a bit more. I think Live and Let Die probably won't be getting a 2020 whatever adaptation anytime soon, but I think this makes it a more sort of authentic reading experience, knowing that this sort of story would not happen nowadays. I think Solitaire's a decently written Bond girl. She's not quite as interesting as Vesper Lind in the last one, but she is still a reasonably interesting character. The inclusion of Quarrel and Strangways very much surprised me. Okay, not Quarrel, I knew he was in Live and Let Die, but Strangways, who obviously is used in the Doctor No movie, he is in the last chapter or two of this book, and he is quite an interesting character. I didn't expect him to be in this because I thought he was unique to the film series and only in Doctor No the movie. I didn't even consider the notion that he would be in a Fleming book, and he is, and he's great. So yeah, this book reminds me a lot of License to Kill and Doctor No, and obviously Live and Let Die. Live and Let Die is quite similar to the adaptation, or should I say the adaptation is quite similar to the book, at least initially, although gradually this changes and the two versions of the story divert, and I don't know which version I prefer, because you couldn't compare, they're two different forms of media, but I think Live and Let Die is definitely grimier, it's darker. I think it appeals to the exciting edge, that part of you that wants an exciting story, because Bond's not going to get out of this unscathed. There is peril, there is danger. It kind of just carries on what we were introduced to in Casino Royale. There aren't as many references to that story as I was expecting. I thought it would very much link the two together, but it doesn't. It's kind of few references, and let's move on. That's kind of it. That's kind of how it played out, but I'm looking forward to the next novel, which I think is Moonraker, which I've heard has very little to do with the 1979 adaptation. Anyway, those are my musings on Live and Let Die, and thank you for watching.